All right. This is the Story Series podcast where we tell the stories behind the people. And today in the studio, we have Caroline Trujillo. Welcome, Caroline.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
If you could just give like a brief, professional introduction as to who you are, that would be great.
Yeah. It's kind of been all over the place. For the past about 5 years, I have gone into the technician industry in aerospace. So I'm working right now on my bachelor's for mechanical engineering, and I'm using that to get all these roles in like test technician roles, electronics, aviation, aerospace, and how that whole industry really works.
Yeah, I noticed that. I was like, okay, in a seemingly like short amount of time, you've been worked in aerospace, in the medical industry. You were at JPL.
Yeah,
as well.
I interned there.
NASA, yeah. Okay, so I think that's just fascinating, and so I want to kind of take it back. I love origin stories, and so growing up, to grow up to be an engineer, were you the kind of child that like was more interested in taking apart their toys to see how they work than like playing with them, or what kind of habits did you have that kind of put those seeds in place?
No, I was like just really destructive as a child.
Destructive.
I was all over the place. I think what does fit into the stereotype though is that I was just super curious, but it was like super unhinged. But I think the curiosity is what kind of kept everything together. I wanted to know how my world worked. I wasn't really, I think, polite in the way I went about things. I was just like not really thinking long ahead. But as I grew up, I was like, I really want to get into a career that allows me to understand how the world works and how to manipulate it and build these great projects. Yeah.
I love that. And I love your word destructive. I was like, okay.
That's the nice way to say it.
Yeah, that's great. So in what ways were you destructive? Like taking things apart that maybe you shouldn't have been? Or...
Yeah, I was just getting into a lot of trouble as a kid. I wasn't like I'm thinking of what's the show, Young Sheldon, where he's like adorable, but like, oh, I'm going to read books all day and do all this. I was like, no, I was setting things on like fire and just doing everything.
Oh, wow. Okay. And how are your parents feeling about that?
I feel so bad for them. They did so much for me. I remember I had a little like crossbow toy and I was like 6, 7 or something. I don't know how I did it, but I was able to like maneuver it. So I was able to like sharpen pencils and use that as like the ammo instead. And after like 5 minutes, they're like, no, that's going away. So stuff like that. But I was also like as equally interested in like bugs and rocks and stuff too. So it wasn't just like really like techie toys or like the robotic toys I was into. I really like just learning about nature and like life in general, space, sky, stars, like going outside. Like nature was equally as important to me. So it really was all over the place.
So when you were transferring to COC, College of the Canyons, here in Santa Clarita, what were you thinking you were transferring there to do? Were you a little bit like wandering, like I'll figure it out kind of thing?
Yeah, of super undecided. I actually, I was planning to go to NAU originally, Northern Arizona University. I got accepted into their program for, I think it was... I wanted to make music videos. I was going into like video editing and like kind of journalism path. So things have really changed. I really was, I think the curiosity kept with me. I really wanted to try a lot of stuff and I couldn't figure out like what really like struck a chord with me. So I went to COC, College of the Canyons for, I want to say like it took about 3 years until I really was like, all right, this is what I want to do. But I didn't get to that choice on my own. I was working part-time and going to school part-time. So when I got jobs, I slowly started getting jobs that intertwined a bit with like engineering and energy. That's when I was like, this is really what I want to do.
And were these are part-time jobs, internships at just different companies?
Yeah, I've had a lot of jobs. I think if you look at my LinkedIn, there's already a lot of stuff on there in terms of like internships and co-ops and jobs. But I've had about a little under 20 like professional jobs, like actually like W-2, all that stuff.
And is that because in your field, and maybe it's similar to animation or the film industry, is it project to project? Is that kind of common where people jump around?
Yes and no. I've seen a lot of companies I'll just say like aerospace in general, like manufacturing will have some projects. Like I know big companies, I don't know if I'm allowed to like say but like, for example, like maybe Boeing or Aerojet Rocketdyne, which are, if you're in the industry, those are pretty well known. They'll have big projects or contracts with other companies that last maybe a couple of years. So it's normal to see them hire a group of like contract workers or temp workers. And then once that project is over, the contract's done, they've delivered, and then there's no need for those workers anymore. So sometimes that does happen. But it's not normal to see someone, I guess, with my track record of like jumping almost every year, which is not because I can't commit. It's just like, and I'll get into it, but like opportunity finds me. And it's when I find a really great opportunity, I'm not just going to say no.
Okay.
Yeah, but you have to you have to be smart about it too. I have to like see all my options. What is this? Is it good for me compared to my other options?
Okay. And so it sounds like they're now coming to you at that point.
In a way, yes, and I'm grateful for that. It's easier to look for opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. And so what kind of reputation at that time do you think you were developing where these companies were like, hey, let's try this kid out? Because at the time you're still very young. So it's like, what are they seeing in you that's like saying, where they're coming to knock?
Honestly, when it was all happening, I had no idea. I was like, whoa, I got an interview coming up. Like someone found me and I guess they liked what they saw on my resume. So I was like, I wonder what they're seeing. And when I look back at it now, I could say this just because I've been through the interview process a lot, and I worked with so many people in my like direct coworkers, but also different departments, hiring managers, engineering managers. So you get a taste of what you start to see what they're actually looking for. But I was like, like you said, like I'm new. I have very little experience to no experience. What do they see in me? But I guess they saw that I didn't realize the emphasis people put on like how passionate are you as a worker and what is your potential to grow. And for me, I was like, I'm eager, like hire me. I will work so hard because I want to invest in myself. I want you to invest in me. I'm going to school, so I'm constantly learning. And I did not realize how, what's the word? I guess more uncommon it is to find that kind of employee, like one that is trying to constantly grow. I see a lot of people, and I'm not trying to bash anybody, like to each their own, but a lot of people life gets busy. So you go to work, you do what you need to, and you go home and you take care of everything else. But I'm doing that and also trying to like go to school part-time while I work full-time and like still manage all my personal stuff, help with my family stuff. And so it's exhausting, but I think they see that, hey, she's someone who's trying and isn't giving up, and she's going to like achieve so much because she's putting all this hard work in now. And I think that's what they are seeing. And some of them have told me stuff like that because I have gone back and been like, so why did you hire me so long ago? I was like, you knew I didn't know anything. And I was making mistakes like early on, but they were like, we could see it in you. Like you had this potential, you had this drive, and that's hard to find. So I'm super grateful for those people. And I could see now where, because I applied myself, those doors of opportunity opened.
So you were at a company called Solar City that was acquired by Tesla. And then you decided to go back to school at that point. Was there an opportunity to go to Tesla? And what was that like?
So good question. I worked at Solar City. I actually I got that job at Solar City because I was at College of the Canyons doing their solar technology program. They had just started up. It was funny. Not funny. But it was interesting. It was before I settled on what degree I wanted and what I felt just really lost with what I wanted to do. I was taking like random classes like in geology, German, different languages, music. And I was like, what feels right? Nothing felt good. I took a solar energy class and I was like, this is pretty cool. But I was actually planning on dropping out like kind of permanently after that semester. I was like, I'm just going to work. I don't think school's for me. I never really saw myself as the college type person. I never did. So I'm surprised I've been in it for this long. I really don't give up. But that's the one solar class I took. The instructor ended up being my future boss. He had worked for a solar company, and during that class was getting interviewed and started working at Solar City. And he spoke to the class and was very open about the industry. And he mentioned that he likes to try to hire one student like from his class and try to get them in. And he saw me, and I don't know what he saw in me. Like we talked about, I guess he saw something, but he was like, hey, you look like you have a lot of passion, potential. How would you like to be interviewed? And this is after we took the whole class. I did very well. So I did very well. I think he liked that. He was like, you know your stuff. You seem passionate. They interviewed me. The team really liked me, and I started there.
Well, what is an interview like? What are they asking you?
They interviewed me it was for a permit coordinator. And so that role was for for their local office to handle like all the projects I said, like with the solar. It was mostly regular solar at that time, to get the plan. So when you do any construction project on your house, if it's major enough, you have like plans laid out. If you're like remodeling something, you have the architect or whoever may be like design the plans. Like, this is what it's going to look like. Here's all our dimensions for everything. Here's the materials we're using. You take that to the city. The engineers have to approve it there, give you their stamp of approval or like red line any corrections. Then you pay for it. You get the permit. It's pretty simple. That's pretty much all you're doing. They're there to look it over, say like, yes, this complies with all the rules. Here's your approval. Go start work. And we'll take that back.
So what's an example of something that an engineer would flag if they see someone applying for a permit? What are some common things where they're like, nope, that's not going to work. Fix that.
A lot of common issues I see are maybe like we will upgrade like your main electrical panel, and they'll want to make sure like the voltage for those fall into line, like the amps for all the circuits are fine. If they see that maybe you're trying to put like a whole solar system and it's connected to this line, like, oh, this isn't enough. This wire size isn't big enough to hold all that amperage. Like, it might get too hot and cause a fire. There could be that. But some cities, every city does it differently because it's not like one for all of LA County. Like, I worked with 32 jurisdictions, and because we covered everything from Santa Clarita to all the way in like El Monte area. Like, we got pretty far south. There's a lot I had to cover. So every city does it differently. And like some really cute, like aesthetic looking cities, like Arcadia, for example, were I love them, but they were sticklers for like aesthetics because they have like a reputation to stand to. So they wanted to know like how many inches off the roof where are the solar panels, and if they're above like 4 or 5 inches, you can't get it. You need a lower, like the tiniest details they could nick you for, and they're allowed to. They can, because they'll have like a not a bill, but like a kind of like a city rule they could reference saying like, yeah, this was approved. You need to abide by this. Your solar panel can't be more than 5 inches off the roof or else you can't have one. So stuff like that. So sometimes it was like, yeah, you have to paint the conduit to match the roof or we won't give you a permit. You'll fail inspection.
Wow. So it's not just safety concerns. It's also aesthetic.
Yep. Depending on the city. And then I think, but it was just some cities, like most of them did not care how it looked. Like if you're in Van Nuys doing something, they're not gonna.
No offense, Van Nuys.
Yeah, or like there's only a handful of cities that were like, hey, we need to make sure this looks like good enough to be on the roof.
Right.
Property values, I don't know.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of politics and property values, things like that.
Yeah, so I'm not bashing them. I know there's so many factors that go into it. It was just like little things that made my job harder. So I had to communicate with my team and the designers that worked on these. I was like, remember, the city likes it this way. I'll look at them. So a good permit coordinator will like know what to look for. So I got to know giant spreadsheets of like, all right, what does each city like? I built good relationships with them. They would know everything. We hardly would fail. Unless something really unexpected came up or like a new inspector came and they had all their new rules. So it was a lot of fun, I guess you could say.
So you're there and then Tesla happens and then you decide to go back to school and then you settle on mechanical engineering.
Yes.
And so that takes you through COC and you're transferring at that point to a university or?
Yes, mostly. So I settled. COC doesn't have, I think most community colleges don't have like different engineering degrees. It's like a general engineering. And that's what you take to get you to university because that covers your first 2 years of the 4-year degree. Like the first 2 years are just mostly like your general ed classes, like the basics of like the fundamentals of whatever discipline you're going into. So it covered all that. And then your senior year and your junior year are going to be like your specialization years. But yeah, I think I was at Solar City Tesla for a total of 2.5 years, a little under 3. And then I quit, went to school. I think I was able to do it full time for about a year before I started running out of money again. And so that's when all the like random part-time jobs like the cafe or something got up. But then I was able to find, that was finally when I was able to find internships that, and like some of them were paid, thankfully. So I was able to get by, start building up my resume and like land internships like at JPL, which really saved me. I think if it wasn't for having such competitive things like that on my resume, I would not have been able to get into the industry. Like they really make you stand out.
Going back quickly, how do you prepare for an interview with JPL? What do you do ahead of time? What is your mindset?
Like panicking the whole time. I got the email that they were like, they got my application and they wanted to interview me, and it was going to be like an interview with their whole team. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't know how to prepare. I was, I found, I should have mentioned, I found that internship because at College of the Canyons, they have, I love the school so much. Like you said, it's great. I love the community college track too. And it's, they offer so many support for students, that you don't see, I think, you don't find so easily at university too. It's very, I like how much more intimate and like just personal it is. So at COC, they have a program called MESA, standing for Math, Engineering, Science Achievement. And it's a program designed to help STEM students, educationally and to get like professional jobs. So they were always listening all these internships and giving out reference letters. So that's how I applied. I found them through the program. I applied. The director, who's amazing, I love her. I believe she's still there. Amy Foote leads the program, and she's also a professor there too. Like huge support. So she'll advocate for these students, she'll advocate for her students to really get these positions and send out letters. And she has contacts with all these people. So I went in like with a good foot already. Like they were like, hey, like we like working with college. JPL works with College of the Canyons a lot. So there's a good relationship there. And so they said, like, we know where you come from. It's great. We want to get to know you. I was like, all right, what do you want to know? I was like, I'm new, you know that, but I'm passionate. I'm studying these classes. I took these. I did well in these. I think it was great that they know I'm a student. So it's not like obviously internships or interviews for internships versus jobs are very different. So they were very more lenient and wanted to see kind of like, how is she as a person? Like, what is she going to grow into versus like, what can you give us right now? Like, what can you provide for us?
Something that you said that stuck out to me was how you're talking about electronics and how there's electronics in everything. And recently we had the experience of we bought a new car. It's like 2025 car. And the last car that I owned was a 2015. So just seeing in 10 years how much more electrical everything in the car is.
Yeah.
And so it seems like a trend in everything. You know, like buying a new washer and dryer. You hear people say, "Well, don't get something that's too electrical or too, you know, fancy with Bluetooth." There's just more things to break down. Sometimes the old-fashioned mechanical washing machine from the '80s or whatever, like, still stands the test of time. Like, how do you look at that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of like opinions into that too. I kind of miss the mechanical stuff. Like I think it's true. Yeah. The more electronics you put into something, the more chance it kind of can break down, because like the electronics can be really sensitive. But there's benefits to it too. Like I know cars, the first one I'm thinking of is like Tesla. When they go through like, they need like software updates or upgrades, they could just do that all wirelessly. So some things are easier. And some things are a lot more user friendly too.
Now, as an engineer, do you have pet peeves? Things that like, you know, modern day, like things that you're using where you go, oh, why is this always done this way?
Every engineer has like kind of like a confidence, like kind of mindset where it's like, I could have done this better. So I'll look at stuff and I think that's what it is. Engineers are so judgy, so judgmental. Cause like we kind of, and I'm speaking for so I'm not speaking for everybody, but I see it a lot, and you see it with like the students too. It's just like, we kind of get big heads at some point. Cause like, you'll work, it's a hard program, but then you look at all these like kind of incredible things you're studying and learning about, these projects you work on, and you're like, oh, I was able to make a robot. And so then you go out into the world and you're like, I could do all these things. And it's great. Like you're so confident and passionate, and you're like, I want to do all these things. Nothing could stop me. But then you're like, oh, what is that like disgusting thing I'm looking at there? Like I could have done that better. How dare you do it like this? So you need to have some like self-awareness and humbleness about it if you want like people to still treat you right.
Well, let me tell you, film students are no different when it comes to watching movies or TV, right? You're a film student, you're like, I could have written a better ending
I
than
could see
that.
that too.
Why did they do that? Why did they put the camera there? You know, I imagine architects have the same thing too. Driving around, looking at buildings, looking at things, like, oh, why? You know,
yeah.
Like I could have, yeah.
I'm glad it's not just us then.
No,
we get a lot of it.
And so as a test technician, what are you doing on a day-to-day basis? Are you testing products and seeing why they fail, how they fail?
Yeah, pretty much. Like if I had to say it in one sentence, I test I test products, and if they fail, I fix them, and if they pass, wonderful. I send them back to the customer. We get a variety of products, mostly from aerospace and aviation. So it's funny, at every company I've worked with, it's almost all the same customers, like Boeing, Northrop, Lockheed, all the big ones, Bay and Honeywell. So a lot of giant manufacturers and producers. But yeah, this role I have right now focuses a lot on repair. My department is called MRO, and so we only get stuff that is coming back for either it's failing on the field, so we're coming in to repair it. Maybe it needs an upgrade, so we're changing something about it. Maybe it's just going through like regular maintenance, so we're just testing it, making sure it's still good, and calibrating it to where it needs to be. What I really like about this role specifically, and one reason that I left my previous job at Curtiss-Wright to come here. Well, I loved Curtiss-Wright, and they're almost the exact same job where I was also a senior test technician there, working on electronics. This role, I can do a lot more mechanical repairs. And so, yeah, I think every company will have different products, but I really was lacking that at Curtiss-Wright. They knew I was getting my mechanical degree, and they were fully supportive of it, but we were just limited in what kind of repairs we could do. Whereas where I'm now, like I'm taking apart products, like I'm using like mechanical tools all the time alongside my electrical stuff too. I work in a big lab, so we have all these machines and test equipment everywhere, like power supplies and multimeters, oscilloscopes. There's different kinds of testings we do on the unit, so we'll have them like in chambers to simulate like hot and cold environments. We have vibration machines to like simulate all those shaking around, and so there's a lot of stuff we could do. And so I could use all that because we use it a lot in the field. Also for like the engineering field, I want to have that like as something I know to do and something I could put on my resume. And also I get bored really easy, so if I just do the same thing every day, I will go crazy. And I think I've shared that with people, and they share the same like kind of sentiment. So it's a common thing. Like I need to have a career and a job where like daily I could use my brain, and like I'm challenged and I could think of new things. Like I can't just sit there and do nothing. So I love I kind of got used to like things changing so much, and I like that every day is different for me, and that I have to like really like think and collaborate with people to like figure out why is this failing and like what is the issue, because you have to be really mindful with your repairs, because like some of this equipment's expensive, so you don't want to like kind of guess like I think it's this and repair something and it wasn't even broken to start with.
So how much of that is like math versus creative on a daily basis?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't know. If you ask me, I think math is really creative, so they go really hand in hand. I when I get a product and it's failing, I'll take it apart, and it varies. Usually, it's something with the electrical. If it's something hardware, like maybe the switch is broken, like you can just change the switch. That's easy. You could see it. But let's say something like a specific test in this thing is failing, and it could be. I'll have to see on the schematic, like what is that test related to? And the schematic is a diagram that covers, it's like an electrical map of the system. Like it's saying, here's the computer, and the computer's kind of like the heart of the device. So, or the brain of the device. So it's telling it like, this is controlling, like this is giving all the, what's the word I'm looking for? This is telling it what to do pretty much. Like, here's all the commands I'm giving you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you have like your capacitors here on this side, and there's resistors everywhere. There's other smaller, I said it earlier, ICs, the integrated components. So like smaller kind of little brains everywhere that give their own little commands, but the brain controls them. So when I see something that's failing, I'm like, all right, let me at least isolate it to the circuit that controls it. And so that could be just like, maybe this part of the schematic. So like this is related to what's failing. These parts are not related to what's failing. And let me start looking there.
So you're hunting for clues.
Yep. So it's like, I think that's why I like it. It's kind of like treasure hunting.
I was going to say, you sound like a detective working in a lab trying
print
to
out this. Yeah. And so it's common to see if something's failing, you'll have technicians and that you print out like a big schematic because you're writing all over them. You're like, I checked this circuit. It's fine. The voltage here is fine, but it's a little weird here. But even then, that doesn't really tell you anything because everything's connected. You could have something failing on this side of your device that is somehow affecting a component here. Like they could be really finicky like that. Or you could have something that fails sometimes but passes others. Like intermittent failures happen all the time.
And what's an intermittent failure?
Where it's not stable. So like maybe half the time you test it, it passes, and the other time it fails. Like you can't see the failure all the time.
And is that frustrating?
It's super frustrating, and we see it all the time.
And what is a common reason for that?
For the intermittent
where do
failures?
you start with that?
That's a good question. Now that I have experience, I finally have like, I think every technician has their own here's my ABCs, like here's my drop down list. When I'm working on a device, and it doesn't really matter if it's like maybe a medical, aerospace, aviation, whatever it may be. I always try to make sure I'll get the report from the customer, and I'm like, let me see if I could actually replicate what the customer is saying. Because you'd be surprised how often like the customer is like how the customer report does not match what we see in like what we're testing.
What they think is wrong is not actually what's wrong.
There's a lot of communication errors, yeah, because you have to be mindful that the technician on the field, like it's some person at Boeing testing this, and they're just scribbling in their notepad, oh, this happened, here you go. And so I'll get the report, and sometimes the customer report, all it says is it failed. That's it.
Oh,
and I'm
gee,
like,
thanks.
oh no, like what
Yeah.
failed? Like
Did
what
you
was
forget to send another page to this?
it happens all the time. So usually I'll try to get as much info as I can, because that's usually all we have to go by. And if not, I have to test like the heck out of this thing and be like, all right, what's it failing? Let me try to get it failing. Because the worst thing is like, let me test it, like the basic test, it passes, I'll send it back, and then it fails again. You don't want to put that kind of risk on the line for like equipment or human life or something. So there's a lot of pressure everywhere. So you're trying to really balance like let me make sure this is safe. I have to meet my quota for the day, because the companies are crazy about that too. Like I have to make sure I'm meeting the goals.
And what is an example of a quota? Like, what are you measuring in that quota?
Like how quickly we can fix the unit and send it back to customers, and while keeping our failure rate as low as possible, like our return rate low.
So
pretty
you're
much
under a
just
lot
that.
of pressure. It's a lot of pressure.
A lot of pressure, and every company is different. Like I've had some companies where they don't ask for like where there's not really any pressure for overtime, that we're quotas, we're always meeting them, because maybe we have that flexibility. But I've been at other companies where there's like always overtime, like working Saturdays is normal. 980s are common industry, so every other Friday will be off, but they'll ask you to come in Friday. And so I'm like, oh, it's a lot of work. So there's a lot they will ask of you. So it really is, it also really is case by case. But yeah, there's all this. But it's funny because they'll say like, oh, like make sure the quality's high. We care about the quality, but also make sure you get like 20 units out a day or something, for example. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's,
there's the business side of it. They have to keep the lights on, and at the same time, nothing can go wrong.
I know.
Like, there's this balance that you just.
they're like, yeah, take it easy, but also make sure you perform. So I'll get my units, and I go with the customer. I get as much information as I can. I see if I can replicate it. And and either way, if I can or can't, I still go through my drop down, and I make sure to check, like, let's say there's a power issue. Like sometimes it doesn't power on, which is super common. It varies by the product. I know like if I get something back, a specific product from whichever company, Lockheed, I'll be like, oh, I know these. And I know that they tend to have an issue with the power supply. So you get to know, it's really how they're designed. Like you start to know, like, it's kind of like cars. Like some cars have a reputation for having a specific failure. It's the exact same in our industry too. And so good technicians that like you'll take notes, and if you're conscious of your time, I'll be like, oh, I know this product will have this issue. Let me look there first, because oftentimes I'll find it there.
And how often do you get something back and the person or the customer just didn't know how to use it? Like there's actually nothing wrong with it. It's in the IT world, it's like, did you turn it off and turn it back on? Like
we get those so much. There's a word for them. And those are called, but it's not terrible. Those are called no fault found, NFFs.
NFF.
Super common. It's an industry standard because it happens. I want to say, if I had to like count it from every company I've worked at for how many customer returns. The returns are called RMAs. And so how many RMAs I send back as no fault founds? Probably half of them.
Wow. And what do you
Yep.
think that's from? Like what, is the wrong person using it? Is it just,
No, it's I see in general for working with electronics and devices that because we work on electronics, but also these electronics aren't standalone. I work on a lot of devices that like go into aircraft. And so you plug it into the plane and it's communicating with all these different devices. And so sometimes it'll look like, oh, maybe this fuel probe is failing. No, it's actually, maybe it's something it's communicating to. So that's why no fault founds are extremely common.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of time, even when we get failures in my field office, in my local office, like we'll be testing something and it fails. A good chunk of the time, it's the equipment. It's not the device itself. So that's also in my drop down list. Like, let me make sure it's not the unit, that it's the test equipment. Maybe it's the cables. Maybe it's the power supply I'm using, because that is super common. That's why it's also like these troubleshooting takes time because you're working with, is it my device or is it like the 10 things my device is connected to?
Something on their end that's just not talking to it properly.
Yeah.
And you have no way of knowing that.
Nope.
Right off the bat. So you're you're trying to find something and you're not going to find it there.
Yeah. If I really can't find it, I'll put this device through like lots of stress testing. And so I could tell them that I did everything I could to replicate your failure and I cannot. Like there's literally no other tests I could do. And I don't want to put this device under more unnecessary stress. Like either give me more information about the failure or it's your choice to accept it back as no fault found, which is super common. And so usually we'll just put NFF and we just send it back. And there's usually no pushback ever because it's such a common thing.
Such a common. So talk to me about not wanting to put too much stress on the device.
Usually that's only if we're putting the device under like environmental stresses. So I mentioned earlier, there's like chambers that we could simulate hot and cold environments. And there's a whole range of environmental testing. Like there's vacuum testing, radiation testing. There's the vibration. There's also shock testing where you go through like a giant shock sense through like a physical shock. Like we drop like a giant weight on a fixture that's connected to the device to like simulate because these are all aerospace parts. You have to simulate how crazy the aerospace environment is. We work on a lot of defense products too. So you need to make sure that it is ready for like a militarized field. So there's a lot of stuff we do. But there's usually, for each product we work on, there's already a set limit of how much we could test it. So it's something that the company and the customer agreed on. Like, hey, if you get units back and you're doing environmental testing, you're not allowed to test more than this much environmental because then you're avoiding the warranty of the product because you're likely putting it in danger or you're hurting the life of some of the components inside. Does that kind of make sense?
Absolutely. And has that happened where you end up, accidentally breaking something more like, okay, that wasn't supposed to happen. And now we need to replace something we didn't anticipate needing to replace.
If you test it as per, there's documents and approved test procedures for everything. So those are all like standard, like they're called, the most common one is ATP, acceptance test procedure. So it's the company and the customer made this testing plan that we both agreed on. So if you follow that like line by line and it's like something still breaks, you're not at fault because you followed their set of rules, the agreed set of rules. But let's say like you go off track and you break the rules and it breaks, you're at fault because you're the reason you tested it past the conditions.
And that's money that your company would just...
Yeah, if they find that the company was at fault, then of course we have to cover everything.
Yeah.
So, and that does happen from time to time. It usually, like let's say I'm repairing something or like someone repairs it, but it's like, I don't know, they twist a nut too hard or a screw and it breaks or something. And it's like, oh, sorry, my bad. And hopefully it's fixable, but if not, there's a term called BER, beyond economical, or that's if it's beyond repair. Beyond economical repair means like it's kind of the equivalent of your car's totaled. Like it will cost way too much to fix this versus like if we just send you a new one. So we'll absorb the cost, send them a new one, and we scrap it or something. Mm-hmm. So there's acronyms and plans in place for everything because like I said, everything goes wrong at some point.
And is there a specific kind of failure that like excites you or like that's like, oh, okay, I'm going to dig into this or this is going to be challenging?
Yes. And I think it's to like whatever the technician's into, but we all hate intermittent failures regardless. Like I hate all that stuff because it's like, why do I have to try so hard just to see the failure? I tend to like failures that have really stumped people. Like, and I joke about this with my boss because I think there's about 20, there's a little under 30 of us technicians on the team, which is big for, it's the biggest company I've worked for so far for just technicians. Usually there's like, I've been at companies where there's 2 technicians or 3. So it varies. Yeah, it's a little under 30 of us. And if I finish my work early, or let's say like the projects I worked on, the contract's over, so we're not getting those anymore for, it could be a year. I'll say like, all right, do you have any really difficult projects? Because I love to learn like that. For me, that's where I learn the most, and it gets me so excited. Like let's say we have projects where they've been sitting for like months because no one knows how to fix them, or we don't have the parts or the resources to fix them, or the customer is still deciding how much money they want to invest in us trying to repair it. Like let's say we spent 100 hours fixing it and we're at the like a budget limit. So there's all these factors that go in. But I'm like, let me just try 1 day, 2 days. Let me see what I could get.
Okay. And when you're at that point, how do you make the decision to walk away or put it down, take a mental break? Because I can imagine you could just be, you know, in there so long that you're not kind of seeing it anymore. You're just kind of, you know, tweaking, or you're doing something that you're just like, okay, this is diminishing returns. I have to like,
Yeah.
you know, I'm working too late or whatever. How do you manage that?
Those are really tough. Because it happens a lot. Like when you get stuck, and then you kind of start getting like pigeon vision where you're just like, everything's turning black around me. And like, I don't know what day it is anymore.
Right.
Usually if, I think at that point I've seen it where like the project management team will jump in, because before you jump into the project, you'll kind of go, if you're good about it, you'll kind of go over what your plan is with your team. And usually that's like your manager, your coworkers, or whoever's involved. But also the people who are not on the tech side. So like the project managers or the customer service representatives. And you say like, hey, I'm going to spend some time on this. How much? And you'll like, it's the labor cost. You'll ask them like, how much time can I spend on this before like I need to stop and put this down? So I've seen it where it's like, engineers hate putting anything down. Like it's really rare to see them walk away. Like I think they kind of thrive on challenges. Like you see it and it kind of motivates you. So usually what I see is like the PM will step in and say like, hey, like you're at the limit. This is your last day. Like if you can't figure it out, like you need to step back. I'm sorry. And they're like, no, 1 more day. I see that all the time.
I think that's very common with that kind of, you know, creative, where they're not good at reining themselves in. They're not good at boundaries. They need someone else to come in and say, hey, take a break, you know, put that down, because they're not the ones that are going to do that.
Yeah. It's also like you'll feel like defeated too. Like you don't want to feel like this thing like kind of proved you like, oh no, now I'm not a good engineer because I can't figure this issue out. So there's like a lot of pressure on yourself to kind of like fix this, or else like all these like bad thoughts set in. But so you can't, and it happens regardless. Like some things are just really hard to solve. So you can't let it really like tell you how to feel about the day.
And then what about like on the drive home, at home, you know, back of your mind, you're kind of thinking about it still, or like?
Oh, yeah, a lot. I want to say most of my friends I think my friends, not technicians, but the people I know who are already engineers and who have been engineers, their whole life is just engineering. I know like one of my coworkers at work, I take that back a little bit. He's not an engineer, but he's been in the technician field for, I want to say like almost 30 years now. Very experienced and a very cool guy. He has his own weather system at home. Like he'll predict the weather, and he's had this for like 3 years, like a year ahead of time. And often, and I'm not saying this because I'm only saying this because I've like seen his like stuff and data and all this and the way he talks about it. But his reports are like half the time more accurate than like what we see on TV about their weather reports. So like I think that's great though. Like people who get into this field are truly passionate about it, and there's no way to like kind of BS your way around it. Sorry, respectfully, but there's like, you see people that just really have the mind to like, I want to understand, I want to apply myself. Like I'm willing to invest so much time and energy and resources into understanding these things. And I think that's fantastic.
And it takes that, because it's not the kind of person that wants to go home at 5 every day.
They'll do overtime so much because they want to.
Yeah.
But it's hard. You need the work-life balance, you really need to have it there. But I get some people take a lot of their work gives them a lot of like meaning and reward, so they'll get like enough sustenance from that. I think to each their own still, because I really like my work-life balance. Like I love what I do. I'm really glad that I love what I do. But I also love like seeing my friends when I can.
Yeah.
And just like just relaxing at home. And also I'm a student, so like I need time to study and all this too.
You do. And the work-life balance doesn't mean everything gets equal time. That's not realistic, but it's like just to have those other outlets just so you can turn off. But I'll say it again, but I'm just hearing so many parallels to like being a writer. It's like, you can stop writing a script for the day, but you're still thinking about it when you get up. You're thinking about it when you're talking to people because you're like, okay, but that scene wasn't quite right, or that line was kind of clunky, or like, I don't know if that. Do you have like a notebook or like notes in your phone where you're I'm gonna try that when I go in tomorrow?
All the time. I have a rule for myself now. I need to keep all my notes like at work. Otherwise, like I will like just be doing something all day. And it's kind of funny. It's like kind of almost like I'll kind of procrastinate by like working on work stuff and not get anything personal done. I need to have that like balance. I need to have good time management because like life's so short with stuff. That's funny. Yeah, it's like always on our mind. It's like you're kind of always on the clock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And what's common too in my field is that people are always working on side projects. So you'll have a script that you're working on that's your own original pilot for a TV series. Or maybe you're going to get together with some friends next weekend and do, a short film or a podcast, right?
Oh, that's cool.
And so do you have something similar like that? Or do you have things at home where you're like, okay, like this is just my little fun project that's just for me?
Man, I know for sure if I wasn't doing school on the side, I for sure would. But like all my engineering, like all that pent up energy, I do just spend at school because I'm in my like senior year. So I'm getting to like the classes are getting really hard.
And
so
what
like
university now?
I'm at California State University of Northridge.
Oh,
so.
okay. Okay. So that was me too.
Yeah,
I was there.
CSUN.
Yeah, CSUN. Okay. So that's taking a lot of your creative time outside of work, like your focus.
But it's good. It's just because like I'm learning all these advanced new concepts. So, and I like with engineering that it builds upon itself. So it's not brand new. Like everything is like interlaced together. And I'm so glad I could apply some of what I'm learning at work, even though what I work on in my career is electronics. I feel like the engineering disciplines are also like interwoven.
I was going to say, there's probably a lot of overlap.
So much overlap, but I like that. But as I'm getting more into like my senior mechanical classes, they're very different than like electronics at the workplace. But I like that I have like the fundamentals for it. But yeah, it's because so I work full time and then I work overtime when I can too. And then I take 2 classes every semester. And then I manage my own household. So like I also take care of all that too. And then trying to make friends, time for like friends, family, like mental health, my own stuff, reading. I try to read on the side and I'm surprisingly getting by, but yeah, like I didn't realize you need to have outlets that just let you relax and just like take your mind off everything else too. Like it really does help you with everything else in the long term.
It's very true. I realized too, I need to have things that remind me that my industry is not the most important thing in the world.
Yeah. Because I think everyone makes that, you kind of get into that headset where it's like your work is your identity because that's normal because it takes up all your life. Like I'll see my coworkers. I know I see my coworkers like 10 times more than I see my family. I'm at work twice as much than I am at home. I'm at home just to sleep and then I leave. So it really is, I think, just how society's really kind of worked the way around it. But yeah, so I know that now I don't tie my identity to work but I do take pride in it still. So there's a balance with it. But because sometimes you never know. There's like layoffs, there's COVID, there's wars. So like you're not guaranteed your job at any time. I think most jobs are like at will employment. So if you tie your identity to it, you take a really big hit. Mm-hmm. And so I've seen a lot of people do it.
Did you say there's COVID and then there's wars?
Sorry, I mean like
no.
World events. But I'm like, wait, world events happen.
Yeah.
that are no one plans for, and they shake up entire industries and nations and the whole world pretty much. Sorry, I should have clarified. That's just like life is unpredictable. For example, ABC happens. Yes. So yeah, you need to. You just need to be like happy with how you're doing. You can't tie your identity to like, and I'd say work, but also like anything. Like you are your identity. Like what you do also outside work happens. Like there's their hobbies, your passions, who you care about, all this too.
Given your experience early on, I imagine you were probably like the youngest person in the room a lot, or one of the youngest people. How did you navigate that? Were there any kind of politics of like, okay, kid, don't tell me, you might have had the right
Oh,
thing, and it's like, okay, what is this, person
yeah,
telling me?
that one's been a journey. Yeah, that one's it's been a lot of sides to it, good and bad. I want to say there's been a lot of good, so it's not all terrible. Because the other hand too, the fields I work in, they're all male dominated, and so I'm going in as a young woman, little experience. I'm also short, so there's which does play like a part too. Like
Is it? Does that play part?
I've seen it where it's like the stature and like of people. Like I'll
Yeah.
see like
Okay.
I don't know if it's just me, but I see a lot of like when I see upper management, a lot of the times they're tall,
So
big
it's that height bias, like, okay, I see now.
like I'll
Yeah.
meet someone, I'm like looking up and I'm like, hey, I'm your new coworker. So it's just like I think it doesn't help me. It kind of makes me fall into like, oh, who's this little girl sort of thing. I get called that, like, who's this little girl? Like, and I'm like, first of all, I'm a woman. They a lot most of the time it's not meant maliciously. So there's good. It's not just all like aggressiveness out there. But yeah, it was I have noticed that I'm not taken as seriously sometimes. And it could be because either like I'm new, I'm young, I'm a woman. It could be all these things. You can't let it get to you. Like if I'm in a dynamic where someone isn't treating me fairly, that doesn't say anything about me. That's all on them. But I need to be able to navigate this because it's in my life and in my work life. I need to either approach that. Yeah, that's how I do it. You need to approach that person. I pride myself on I have really good relationships with my coworkers, and we're all good buddies now. But I worked really hard to become like someone who is easy to approach and professional, and I have boundaries. And it took years to understand what are healthy work-life boundaries. So now when I run into situations that aren't ideal, I can have, I'm confident that I could have healthy conversations with people and be like, hey, I saw this happening. Let's just be upfront about it. Is there something going on? Like, do you want to talk about it? Is there something about us? Like, I want us to find a solution. I want to be a good coworker and us have a good relationship. How can we make that happen? You have to approach it as not me against you. Like, here's me and you, and here's our issue. How do we fix it? So it's on one hand, I'm glad I'm better able to have those conversations and navigate those situations with people that I work with and just in dynamics in general. But it was really rough starting out. It was hard being like either the only woman on the team, so there's not a lot of places I can go to that I felt safe like speaking out. But it did kind of toughen me up. I just wish there was like, it wasn't as hard trying to get toughened up. I feel like I got a little bitter. Like when I run into people who, I guess, because there's a lot of variations of the kind of unfair treatment that I get. And like sometimes it'll be just like plain sexist. I could feel myself just getting like bitter, and like the way I respond to people is so much more harsher now. I still do it respectfully, but I'll see like 5 years ago, like I wasn't like that. I was more kinder. So there's both those sides. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Do you think it's bitter, or are you stronger?
I want to say both. Like I'm I I know I am stronger, like I could handle these situations, but I think I used to have more faith in the goodness of people. And that like now when I meet new people, it's kind of like a thought in the back of my head that like, oh, I hope like this doesn't happen, or like, oh, that look was kind of weird. I wonder why. And so
Or
it's stuff like that. Like
will I have to work harder to impress this person, or are they gonna,
yeah, like
you
are
know?
they already kind of judging me? Like, oh, am I gonna have to have a conversation with them at some point? And like most of the time my intuition is right. I was like, oh, I kind of felt this coming. Like now I have to talk to this person. And it kind of sucks that I have to talk to like grown men about their behavior towards me. And I'm like most of the time these people have like families and children and daughters. And I'm like, why, like, how does this make sense to you?
There's, I think, a stereotype, the engineering mindset lacks social cues or social skills. Like, is that something that you find, or is it,
I see that. No, yeah, that's true. Because I feel like that is evolving a lot too. But like a lot of times engineers that industry gets told like, oh, like you guys are like very book smart, but there's a lot of like maybe people skills you're missing. I feel after working in the industry for so long that it's kind of not as it's not as relevant as like people think it is because with engineering you have to work with so many people. I've never seen an engineer just like this is one guy by himself, this is all he doesn't talk to anybody. No, you need to work with project management managers, the customers, and that's a tough one too. So you have to know how to navigate customer relationships, how to say things in the right
So
way.
engineers talk to customers. There's not someone between them.
It varies, but usually customers want at least one engineer to talk to. They need someone who knows the technical side. And there's only so much you could explain to a non-techie person to then
Right.
like you don't want like all this like game of telephone. So usually there's always an engineer in the room, if not two, or a technician. Technicians are more rare because they're a little more lower on the
Right.
on the field. But yeah, there's always like an engineer there. And what I see now too is in this industry, a lot of like project management team have backgrounds in engineering. Like I think it's probably the most common degree I see them have. Like if I had to round up all the project managers I've worked with in the past, the most common degree is electrical or mechanical engineering, like a vast majority.
Looking at how you started and just having all different kinds of models of, more senior engineers around you, did you see that kind of cost in some of them of like not having those proper work-life balances, like the kind of, the stereotype of the all-consumed, engineer who never goes home. And it's like, this is, the rest of his life is taking a hit because of this. I need to make sure I, adjust and be aware of that.
You see it sometimes. I see it, I was gonna say mostly with I want to say the veterans of the field, like, but I want to say it's more like a general, I want to say this applies to areas outside engineering too. Like I'll see people who, oh, man, I don't know like a nice way to say this. Like, I don't know, you tell me if this sounds weird, but I'll see people who don't really have a lot to like go home to. And that's why they spend so much energy and time at work. But at the same time, their work is what gives them meaning too. But I know people who will like gladly stay in the office 14 hours a day, every day, not even being asked, but because that's their whole life now, because I think maybe little choices every day made it that way. So it's like, why would you go home early? Does that make sense?
Sound weird? That sounds pretty powerful, actually. Like what you said, that, and it's like, yeah, the last 20 years, maybe in their life, they've made choices that now it's like they don't have the best relations at home or just with family or whatever. Maybe they're divorced, whatever. But it's the result of, those micro choices along the way that now...
slowly their life has become all work because that's always what they put first. So now there is nothing to go back to. But some of them, I guess they like it that way. Like I'll talk to people and I'm like, man, you're here like every day. Like you get here before I come here and you leave after I leave. I'm like, are you okay? And they're like, I love it here. I was like, you should take a vacation. I'm always pushing that on people. I was like, you work too hard, go home. Everyone knows that's my reputation. I tried to not do overtime whenever I could help it. I'm a really strong proponent for work-life balance and that like our time outside work matters. Like life is short. Tomorrow's not guaranteed. Like you should do what you want to do with your life, not because someone tells you they need this product today. So I know that's a little also like a sensitive topic, but I really believe no one should tell you like what to do with your life.
That's amazing. Were you always like that when you started? Because the classic like hungry up and comer is like, I'm going to work on the weekends for you. But to have that kind of confidence to set that boundary, I think is so important, but rare.
It was not. I was the opposite. When I got that first technician job, I was like, I'll work every day. I'll sleep here. But I was also like, I needed cash desperately. Like I needed money. So I needed a full-time job. It was my first job in this career. And I was like, I can't drop this. I might not get another chance. So I had two huge motivations for like, I need to impress like the socks off of them and like do amazing. And because I know this is going to be a stepping stone in my career. Like I can't be the person who fails here and doesn't get another chance. So I had that pressure on me. Now that I have, I don't know, I feel like I'm still fairly new in this industry because I see people who've been in here for like 10, 15, 20 years and that's like normal. And I'm barely coming up on my 5th year, but I feel like with the engineering background, it helps so much that I've grown. But yeah, somewhere along the way, I realized that business is just business. The company is there to make as much money as they can, but that also means they have incentive to pay you as little as possible and to make you work like as much as you are willing to work pretty much. And so after seeing that, and that's at every single company because that's just how they're made, which is, we all know that. You have to realize like my time is just as valuable. Like you're here to make money, but so am I. Like it has to be a fair relationship. Like I'm giving you my time and labor and skills, and you are giving me X, Y, Z and benefits. Like I need to make sure it's fair. And you're asking for all these things, but you have to remember that it's just a ask. Like overtime is an ask. It's not mandatory unless it's like written somewhere. Your duties are not mandatory unless it's also written somewhere. So I saw that no one is going to advocate for you unless you speak up for yourself. Like you have to be the one that sets the boundaries and tells them no. Like this is what I will do. If you want me to do more, you need to pay me more. And it's not that I'm not grateful, but it's this is what I feel is healthy.
That can only come with a lot of confidence.
It's
that you develop over time. I think what you just said can literally be applied to every single field.
Life's hard. Like everyone's kind of just out for themselves, and it's you can let it like get you down, but at the end of the day, it's just kind of how life is. So like don't let it get you down. Make the most of it. There's great companies out there that will help you grow and invest in you, but it's also like they will. And it's with people too. It's with relationships, like with your friends and family. People tend to treat you and respect you like how you treat and respect yourself. So you need to set that standard very soon. And you just always need to communicate. But yeah, it was scary. It was hard. And I think I didn't, you call it confidence, but I think for me, it felt like you see these scenarios, these bad situations happen enough where you're like, I'm not putting up with this anymore. And that I pull that word a lot, like bitter. Like I feel like I was so hopeful for like all these great companies. I was like, oh, they're going to help me grow. But then you see like, oh no, it's like really like, it's like a Shark Tank over here. So you had to like grow thick skin. And while I'm still grateful and happy and I love my career, I have like these like metaphorical scars and lessons that I carry with me so that I can continue being like a tough player and like getting out there. Because you do have to be kind of tough, I think, probably in any industry to survive and to succeed. Like if you want to get high enough, you have to learn how to like navigate those waters.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I kind of learned too in the entertainment industry, going from job to job, show to show. Hopefully each show you're growing and you're getting that promotion from, you're a staff writer to a head writer to this and that. But there's no one that's going to tell you, hey, now's a good time to like have a family or now's a good time to like have a vacation, or like, hey, you have a couple years of stability coming up. You should do this. Like no one is going to do that for you. And at best, you can hopefully see that in your superiors who have been working for 50, 20 years. They have families, they have older kids. And it's like, okay, how are they doing? How did they navigate that? But you realize you have to do that for yourself.
I'll see a lot of companies that kind of like bully or pressure their employees into like, oh, you need to perform this. Like, oh, this doesn't look, if you don't work this Saturday, it's not going to look great. But that's so, I hate seeing like those like unhealthy power dynamics at play. Like, and it happens all the time where just like people who really need jobs and want to perform and they work so hard are like getting bullied into pushing more and more. Like I'll see companies that are like, we had our best month in years. Next month, do twice as good. And if not, like you guys aren't getting pizza or something, or you know what, like I'm exaggerating, but it's like leeches. I don't know. I'm not trying to like be so like negative about it, but
that's like you put it perfectly. That's their job to make as much money as they can. And it's your job to make as much money as you can and not at the cost of your life and your
correct
health.
And the end of the day, it has to be mutually beneficial and you need to decide what you're willing to take. And I say that like that's why I compared it to like regular friendships and relationships. Like is this like it's you set your life standards. Like what are you willing to accept? What do you want for yourself? What kind of life do you envision for yourself? And try to make that happen. And if they're the kind of company that like will discipline you because you choose not to come in every Saturday, that's not somewhere you want to be. But again, you have, I'm lucky I have the luxury of saying no. Like if, let's say worst case, I get fired tomorrow because I didn't want to work overtime, I'm not going to be crying, looking for like the next paycheck. I have my emergency fund, but a lot of people don't have that. So it's really, I think it really goes into like the socioeconomics of everything too. So I say all this, there's like, it's a luxury to be able to say no sometimes. So I understand that. I don't bash people when they do come in for overtime because sometimes they need it, or I see scenarios where you can't confidently say no.
Yeah.
And that's fair too.
Yeah.
Like I'm lucky I don't have like kids I need to like provide for, but my coworkers who do completely understand why they feel the pressure.
Yeah. 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 Wow. Well, I want to take just a detour and talk about AI. And do you see that at all playing any sort of role in what you're doing? Or is that like a controversial topic? Like, how is that being viewed?
It is interesting because it was funny. I think like AI was started getting into mainstream end of last year.
Very recently.
And now it's like, I feel like everybody's kind of adopting it. I don't know if you heard, but like CSUN is fully adopting AI into their program, into their whole school system.
No, in what way?
And I forgot, they sent an email, but I think they're integrating it into the way students navigate like a school life and their program. They're doing it in some like integral way that incorporates the campus as a whole. Like they're fully accepting AI into like the way CSUN operates some of their systems. So I was like, whoa, okay. And I see it with some of my classes. Like I have a professor this semester right now who is fully encouraging us to use like ChatGPT and AI as a tool for our engineering projects. And then I'll have conversations at work where some people are very against it because of either like the way it collects its data or the reliability of its data, or that it's going to make other jobs obsolete. So there's all these, and to be fair, those are all fair opinions. So there's all these factors that come in. For engineering, I have to say it's mostly positive. People really like it as a tool. I've seen so many people use it for like coding programs, and it saves you so much time. Like you'll have, let's say you're trying to tell a computer to do like this function, you'll have it complete the whole template and you just have to fix little parts of it versus making a whole new thing on your own.
I've heard that it's not AI that's going to replace your job. It's someone who knows how to use AI.
Oh, I hear that too. Yeah. They go really hand on hand. I think the industry is still seeing what like a job for managing AI is even looking like. But right now I haven't really seen much. I know people who work a lot in like machine learning, but they're usually working on like big systems overall, and you're still working hand on hand with people who handle like the power of that, the electronics of that, the I don't know, the paperwork and documentation of all that stuff too, and how it applies to like other nations. I don't know. I feel like it's still, the field is definitely there and it's going to keep kicking up, but that we're still figuring out what exactly it's going to look like. It's like a picture that's blurry and it's slowly becoming more like.
Great metaphor. That's absolutely true, because I think in my industry, people are worried it's going to, that studios are going to use AI to write scripts or produce artwork and replace, the human hand, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But I have some just mixed thoughts about it, because if you're editing a video on a computer and maybe you are, exporting it in such a way that you are increasing the sound quality, like, is that not AI? Isn't there not already AI in computers? And so but there's such a blanket, no AI was used to make this thing. And I'm like, is that true? Isn't a computer AI? I think it's the degree to which AI is used that can rub people the wrong way, at least in my field. But are we not already using AI all the time?
No, yeah, that's true. And that's why I think people really emphasize like it's a tool. It depends how you use that tool, because it's gonna be impossible to avoid using it. Like there's already like AI in like phones and cars and probably in like a blender at some point.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, is a calculator not basic AI? I mean, or is that too? But I guess I just have a problem with this like no AI rule, because it's like we're already using AI. You have to be more specific if you are trying to fight.
Yeah.
Its application in our field.
Yeah, I think especially, and I know it's very different for the engineering versus the creative industry, because with like, people complain like you're making entire projects and artwork and you're cutting out all these people, and like you have something that people argue like, what can you say like this even counts because like a human didn't make it? So you have all these like ethical and moral arguments about it, and we're still trying to figure all that out. But with the engineering, you don't have that issue as much because you have these projects that are already kind of based in computers and logic. And so you're using a logic-based device to help you make those decisions. But there's also the issue with accountability. Like, let's say you have AI handle this project and it fails. Who do you point the finger at? Who is responsible and how do you avoid it again? So there's, I think, a lot of documentation we need and like standards and rules. So that's why I think it's an up and coming field, but we have a long way to go with like, how does each industry use this morally as a whole? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And it'll be different for each industry for sure too.
Yeah, you still need someone to, check its work, so to speak. You
Yes.
can't just fully rely on it and then say, oh, well, that, that wasn't me, that was the AI. It's like, well, no.
Yeah.
You can't just
And that's
fully,
with anybody.
Yeah.
That's with anything too.
Mm-hmm. What makes a good engineer?
Oh, that's a good one. I want to say there's two main things that you don't need to know everything. You just need to know the fundamentals. At least know the fundamentals, and you could know how to navigate almost any engineering problem. You know where to start looking. You know where to open the book to. And the second one is know that you don't know anything, that you don't know everything. You need to have some degree of open-mindedness and humbleness and realization that me on my own is not going to fix everything. Like, that's not the best way to solve it. The best way to solve it sometimes is by reaching out to other people. You'll see a lot where people try to take on big tasks and try to handle it on their own, maybe impressing someone or just like maybe confidence booster themselves. But like most of the time, you'll take longer, you're stressed, you're making mistakes. So as long as you know the basics, you know where to go from, and you need to know when to ask for help. Because there's always so much, it's a lot of work. You need to know when to ask for help.
And asking for help, are there, because you're on a team, people on the team that have reputations for being, an expert in this kind of issue, even though they're, they understand the broad picture. It's like, oh, this is, this person's really good at X. This one's like really good at Y. Do you kind of know who to?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah. Usually you'll get to know your team and you'll have a team for each project you work on. So like, there'll be like multiple electrical engineers, but they're all working on different projects. So you'll get to know everybody. So, like if this is not your forte and maybe you could solve it, but it would take 3 times as much time, it'll be much faster and you'll have like a reliable solution if you go to the expert of it. So you really need to see, it's really about seeing what resources are available to me. Like what actions can I delegate to get this project complete? You need to be able to put your ego aside and put the project first and to understand it from that viewpoint, because there's time and money and customers involved, and you need to know what's best for the whole team and not just you.
This is something I ask everybody. It's called the rule I break. So every industry has rules. Some are there for a reason, and some are there just begging to be broken. So what's a rule in your field that you don't follow or believe in?
That's a funny one. All right, I'll explain, but I don't believe in like job titles. I think everything is made up completely. And I say this with as much respect as I can to every company that exists. But yeah, everyone makes up their job titles. We all do everything anyways. Like everything, duties are always changing. And I don't think that's a bad thing. So everywhere I work, I see that you're going to work with every single department. And it gets in the way when you let your title kind of dictate what you can do. Like if, let's say, like I'm only supposed to do X, Y, Z, and that's all I'm going to do. It takes so much time to kind of really get stuff done because you're like waiting on this person to reach out to this person to get an answer for something you needed from this guy all along. So now the way I handle things is I kind of ignore all those things as politely as I can. Let's say like I need to reach out to someone like 3 departments away, but there's like 3 chains of management that I need to go through. I totally ignore that. I just go to them and I'm like, hi, like I'm new here, blah, blah, blah. Or I say that so much because I'm new everywhere, but I'll be like, oh, I was hired a couple months ago. I'm trying to find an answer to this. Can you help me? But slowly you start building like rapport with people and relationships, and they'll see like, yeah, like, oh, I know I'm not supposed to reach out to you, but I just wanted to see how I could help out. Like my team's kind of busy. Is there anything I could do? So it's really how you word it. It's how you're making people feel with your words. But I think that when you go about things respectfully and with good intentions, most of the time it works out okay. And also, it's kind of that mindset that helps me get like results done pretty quick. Because the more I can reach out to other people and like understand how their job relates to mine, I get a better picture, like overall, like what are we all doing together? Like where are the bottlenecks? What can I help prepare for and avoid? So that's why I ignore the job titles and I kind of do what I think is best, but I do try to get some input on it too, because I know I don't know everything. But that's why I go. Like I like to learn.
I see a parallel there with like ignoring or being okay with not hiring someone with a degree, because a degree is basically a job title before you have the job. And so there's that open-mindedness of just like, look at the experience, look at the person, rather than just being judged solely by what's in front of their name.
Yes.
A degree.
Yeah. That's why I feel like they're really limiting. Like people have so much potential. So when you kind of put them in this corner and all these like, here's only the stuff you could do, don't worry about anything else, I feel like you're really limiting people. This goes hand in hand with what I said earlier about like, I'm not going to do more than what you pay me for. So I'd be mindful with that too. Like I make sure like if I'm continuously doing stuff way outside my job duties, and it's becoming like expected of me as opposed to me voluntarily doing this. I'm like, hey, like boss, like manager, hey, I do this, this, and this. I feel like it deserves like extra compensation. Like, what do you feel about that? And if they push back, then I'm like, all right, I don't need to waste too much time here or something.
Right.
I like my work. I like getting it done and I like to help the company. But at the end, I need to make sure like I'm also being compensated for this too. So I take both.
Yeah. I have to get your opinion on this. Elon Musk with SpaceX or Tesla is like famously question every regulation.
Oh,
right?
yes.
How annoying are regulations?
It was funny when I worked for Tesla, seeing all that. And this was when I worked for Tesla, it was, I think 2015, 16. So it was like 10 years ago almost. So things were very different. But I think that part of him was still like very prevalent. Like we would see, I don't know if you remember, but we got at some point, I think someone wrote an article about him saying this, but I remember like working at Tesla one morning, we all got an email. He would send out occasional emails to everybody, just a general like, hey, this is how I feel about this. And I'm like, oh, what did he say this time? So we looked at it and he said, if you're in a meeting and you feel like it's a waste of your time, just walk out and you will not be disciplined for it. Like if your boss has you in some meeting, you are like, I'm Elon telling you to walk out of that meeting, tell your boss this is a waste of my time, and I promise you, you won't be fired. He was like, just go about it like the right way. But we would see stuff like that. And I was like, most people were on board, like, because I think that's such a common complaint where it's like, I see a lot of times, a lot of meetings where I don't need to be in there the whole time. Like if I'm in this meeting for like an hour and a half, but you just needed me for the first 10 minutes or maybe like 5 minutes in like dispersed in there, that's wasting like an hour and a half of my time that I could have been working on something else. And that happens to managers all the time, engineers all the time, because you're trying to balance these meetings where it's like, oh, you're required to be in here. The customer wants you, but like this isn't relevant to you. But we still expect you to perform all these job duties as if you didn't have all these meetings all day, every day. So it's both. I did really like that part about Tesla, about like questioning status quo and like he wants the employees themselves to bring up, well, what could we do to be more efficient? What could we do that maybe isn't common or like standard industry? But like, who cares? Like, let's see if we could change it and make it better. There was a lot of like, just speak out. Let's try it. Let's get new opinions, like innovation. So that was really fun. Did I answer that correctly?
Yeah, that was great.
Some managers didn't like it though. Like there'd be some people who'd be like, ignore that email, guys. That doesn't apply to us. But
oh gosh, but you can get meeting to death, and then you're in meetings all day. You're like, did I do any work today?
You could do so many meetings where it's like, this could have been an email, and I could have done like all this work.
I like to end every conversation with just a little rapid fire round. So 5 questions, and just say what comes to mind. What's the last book you read?
Oh, the one I'm reading right now?
Sure.
I'm reading this with a friend. We're reading the Satanic Verses. It's been on my list for a while.
Verses.
Yes, it's a famous book.
Yes.
I believe the author almost got stabbed over it because it was the ideas are very controversial.
Yes, there was a Oh, what is his
It was a
name?
while back.
There was a
Salman Rushdie.
Salman Rushdie. Yes, and he
Yes.
got stabbed in his, and now he has a patch over his eye. Uh huh.
Oof. So, anyways, it's
Yeah.
been on my list for a long time. It was hard. It's been really hard trying to find hobbies while I'm doing work in school. But I think like since last year, I put priority on like really focusing on myself and these healthy hobbies. I got an Oura ring to help. I'm really putting my health first and like what I can do, and it's been paying off really well. It feels weird because I'm like, I don't even have time for hobbies. I feel like I have more time now that I've made time for hobbies. Like I think my stress is lower and I could just see more clearly. But yeah, the book, I'm like almost 100 pages in. I do like it. It's interesting. I'm really glad I picked it up.
What's a movie you love rewatching?
The Mummy Returns. Favorite movie ever. The old one with like the really bad CGI.
Is that Brendan Fraser?
Yeah, I love him. Godzilla too. I don't know why. It's just like, I'm not a big movie person. My first job was at a movie theater for almost 3 years. I hated it. But yeah, so I can't stand popcorn, but I love those movies. They're just so sentimental. I guess as a kid, I would watch those like every day. I'm not kidding. Like every day, I would tell my mom, like 5 years old, like, I need to watch this movie right now. And I'd have nightmares all the time because I was way too young. But I love that movie.
If it wasn't this, what's another career field that you would see yourself in?
Oh, like not in engineering at all?
Mm-hmm.
I really want to start my own nonprofit. So I think I would get in that. I volunteer. I didn't get into this, but I like to volunteer abroad when I can. So I've been to Indonesia, Nicaragua, South Africa. I went to Peru recently, and I love doing humanitarian projects. I love to learn about the world. The curiosity stayed with me from my childhood. So I would really love to be able to give back to my community while also connecting with it too.
What's the worst piece of advice you've ever received?
Oh, that's a good one. Probably, I don't know, I need like an asterisk for this one. Like work really hard. Like just the blanket statement, just work hard. That's it. No,
Yeah.
that needs to be, you need to work hard, but you need to be mindful about it too. I've seen people who work so hard for companies their whole life, like we said earlier, and then the company has a bad year and lets you go. The company's not there to hold your hand. So you really need to work hard into things that truly matter to you. And that's not just with work, that's with your friends, relationships, yourself, your hobbies. Just be mindful about where you put your energy.
And finally, best piece of advice you've ever received?
Probably like just nothing matters. Not like nihilistically, but just that it's any situation you come across is not as terrible as it seems. Like mostly everything is doable. And from my experience and just how crazy life could be, everything usually turns out okay. So just go in with like good hopes.
This was such a pleasure to talk to you. I really, really appreciate it. This is so enlightening, and so many things you've said about your field are truly universal and really can apply to any field, that kind of thinking. And this was just great. So thank you for sharing your story, Caroline.
Thanks so much for having me.